This is exactly what 2021 needs is a big disaster movie. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, and I have just seen this film. It's called Skyfire, and it is, especially when we've not had a lot of big Hollywood tentpole blockbuster movies, this was so refreshing. It's a kind of disaster movie that I loved seeing as a kid, and it is so over-the-top fun. I can't wait to talk to the director, Simon West, who's here to join us on the Film Threat Podcast. Simon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
It's good to be here, Chris.
Great. I really love this film, and also for another reason as well. I grew up watching the Toho monster movies, and it always seems like they would put in sort of a token white dude, right? It'd be like, Nick Adams or Russ Tamblyn or someone like that they would throw in. And this was sort of an ode to that. So I grew up watching those films. So seeing this, I've always loved Asian cinema. And this is a great hybrid. Where did this whole thing start? I think it's just it looks like you spent $1 billion on this movie.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that the token Westerner in there, because we've got Jason Isaacs as the Westerner in the middle of this story, but it is I think a homage to those type of films you were talking about, and really it is described as a disaster movie. But when I started to plan it and get involved in it, I soon realized that I had to sort of make a bad guy in the movie, and there wasn't a single sort of personal character that was that bad that really wanted to root for the heroes to fight against. So I sort of turned the volcano into the bad guy, which is a monster. So it's a monster movie. So it is a very much like those sort of Asian films of Godzilla or that kind of thing, where this huge, powerful being, which in this case is a volcano, is attacking our heroes. And so when you start thinking about it as a monster movie as well as a disaster movie, I sort of have a lot more to play with. And every time the volcano turns up, it does something more evil and crazy than it did last time.
I'm so glad you put it that way, because it's exactly what I thought. I thought watching this, like, this reminds me of those big monster movies that I enjoyed watching as a kid. But also the reason that it's grounded is there are personal relationships, right? There's the father-daughter relationship, right? Which, there's tragedy behind that. I don't want to give too much away, but in order for this to work, you have to care about those characters. So how did you go about building those relationships? And also the cast is amazing, by the way. Like any disaster movie, don't fall in love with too many people too quickly, because you're gonna, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen for sure. But tell me about just building that cast and the care that you put in with this. I thought that the cast was just fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I try to get it's an international cast in some ways, but mainly from China, and so I try to get some of the best actors out of China that the Western audience may not know. I think one of them, Wang Zhuqi, was in an incredible actor from China, was in Iron Man 3, and Hannah Quinlivan, who is the female lead scientist, was in Skyscraper, a very small part though. So a lot of these Asian actors are huge in China and Greater Asia, but unknown to the Western audience. And so I gathered the best I could of these people together. And the script was originally written in English, and then all the actors I cast, luckily, were almost all bilingual. So because I knew I was aiming this very much at China, I shot all the scenes both in English and Chinese. So, which was really interesting because, and then there's a couple of actors like Jason Isaac doesn't speak Chinese, but I made it in the story that he can understand it. And Wang Zhuqi doesn't speak English, but I made it so he could understand it. So they could have a conversation and mix Chinese and English. And I did that with a lot of the scenes. So it wasn't until editing that I decided necessarily which scene would be in English and which would be in Chinese. But obviously that, presented a huge problem, a challenge, I suppose, shooting is, because obviously the first takes I did in English, I understood exactly what's going on. And then I'd shoot the same scene again in Chinese, and it's very different culturally, the way Chinese is delivered. So I had to have a very, accomplished translator to tell me the, intonation and the subtext of what the Chinese dialogue was saying, because I knew the content. I knew they were saying it's the same as, the English, or what actual dialogue was, but the way they said it, I had to then be told, oh, they did that take with more aggression, or that take was more sympathetic. Do you want the actor to do it, that way or the other? And so then I would be able to say to the actor, oh, do it more like, the take you just did, because it's more sympathetic. So it was an extra challenge for me on top of all the, technical challenges of shooting a volcano movie. But I think in the end, it gives it this sort of international vibe that is very genuine. And it certainly went down well in China. They accepted it as not as a tokenist film. There's not just a few or one Chinese character in there. There's real Chinese characters and with a real emotion. And they love to have a very strong emotional content. And it's my philosophy for making a film like this as well, is that if you're going to have a bad guy or a monster, you really want it to affect your lead character somehow. And so that's why I set up at the beginning that this volcano has struck our lead character in the past when she was a child and affected her and her family very badly. And so she sort of has a grudge, or at least a salvation complex, that she needs to save other people from what she went through. So once that's set up, you kind of understand the parameters that, she's damaged by this volcano from her childhood, and now she has to protect the rest of the world. And so she's got a big weight on her shoulders. But this is a hell of a monster that's coming after her. So you've got the emotional basis, and then after that, you can just have fun with the roller coaster ride, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it works so well because, you're so rooting, obviously, for them, which I think is the key to any disaster movie. You're going to introduce a bunch of people you like, and, not all of them are going to make it. The thing that also struck me was, at least for the first chunk of the film, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. I could see a resort like this existing. I mean, it was like, there's a really romantic proposal scene. There's just like, I thought that this thing seems like it could exist. Where exactly did you shoot this idyllic environment?
Well, I actually shot in Malaysia and an island off Malaysia called Langkawi, which is just below the sort of Thai border. And it sort of had that real jungle feel to it. It had the ocean and on all the environment. And it was on the edge of the Pacific. So I sort of gathered an international crew of 17 nationalities, all from all over the world, from Australia, New Zealand, west coast of the States, and Canada, China, Malaysia, all over the world. I think it was 17 different nationalities. And luckily, most people spoke English, but it was a very international feel to it. And it was a very real feel to it because we were in the real environments. I wish I was sort of one of those directors that sat on a green screen stage, in the air conditioning and making phone calls and going home at 5:30. But my films tend to always end up in a jungle or underwater or in some hostile environment, a desert. So we're really going through what you see on the film. There's the real heat. I try to have real flame, real explosions, and not a lot of CGI. Obviously, there's some things you have to with a volcano, but pretty much everything else I'm doing in front of the camera. So the actors' actions are real, and the thing about a lot of these Chinese actors is they're used to pretty hard conditions. They make a lot of these period films where they're doing a lot of stuff for real. So they don't complain at all, which is amazing. So I'm throwing ash in their face and flame and whatever, and they are just used to it. And they're telling me stories of when they worked on this, fantastic, period drama like, House of the Flying Daggers or Hero or something like that, when they're standing in snow in bare feet for 6 weeks. So, they're a hard bunch of people, these Chinese actors. So it was very good for me to be able to put all the realism in like that with them.
Well, it's a really good mix of practical effects, obviously, and enhancement with CGI, which I thought was stunning. Like, not like, I mean, I don't know if I can even name a disaster movie recently that has been able to utilize all the tools that are at your disposal. What was it like to put all that together? And there is some, not just effects with the volcano, but there's this action scene where these two sort of shuttles that are side by side. That scene I thought was like just insane, over the top, like really amazing sort of, these designed sequences. What went into putting all that CG together to make it look so flawless?
Well, that again is one of my favorite scenes, because in the original script that, you started working on a couple of years ago, that pretty much everything happened within, the 4x4 car. They drove up the mountain in the 4x4 and they had to come down in the 4x4. And that wasn't really enough for me to play with. And so I said, I really need another, source of jeopardy for everybody. And I need to have something to go with this, the car coming down the mountain. So that's when I really, started to invent things like the resort and the observation towers and all the mechanical stuff that would go into a tourist attraction. I looked at, the Chinese tourist attractions. They love these glass walkways and these glass observation decks on the top of, huge mountains and things like that. And then there's also in the UK, there's a glass pod that goes up and down in Brighton for people to observe, out to the ocean. And so I started putting all these real things together. And then I love the, the theme park aspect, like of Disneyland, with those sort of futuristic monorails, that were very kind of 60s Jetsons vibe. And, to me, that's, I put all those things together and I go, okay, now I've got enough ingredients to play with and make a sequence. So, I have two of these things and they got to get it down the mountain, and one's breaking down and one's hit by lava, and they have to jump from one to the other to save themselves. So I have to give myself enough tools and things so I can make up enough sequences for the audience. And that takes months, so it starts percolating in your head when I'm watching a YouTube video of one of these things, and then it percolates into storyboards, and then it'll go on to back into the script, and then we'll start planning with all the departments. So okay, like what of this can I do for real? What can I build? What can I enhance with CG? What has to be total CG because it's just too difficult or dangerous to do? And it's a giant jigsaw puzzle. But that's the fun bit I really like of these action movies, is coming up with the mechanical aspect of it, of how do you invent the world's most interesting and disastrous monorail trip down a mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that scene is one of my favorites. It's super fun. Now I'm curious, here we are in 2021. The film is now opening in the United States. It was a huge hit in China. What do you think the audiences in the United States, like, how is this going to strike them? I mean, for me, I watch movies with subtitles all the time. I don't care, but I wonder, well, what can you do to kind of convince people, like, look, this is worth the investment to see this, because it's not like any huge disaster movie you've ever seen. I'm just curious, like, if you're feeling there's any issue between, like, the Chinese audience obviously loved it, and are there any challenges with a US audience?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it is a film you could watch without understanding a single word. It is a roller coaster ride, literally, down this side of this mountain. And I certainly don't speak Chinese. I mean, I can now direct a little bit in Chinese, so a few orders, and and obviously, I can follow it, and I made it, so it's made by someone who doesn't speak Chinese. So essentially, I think it's very user friendly in that way. And if you want to, go deeper, you can, read the subtitles. And I think that it's not a long and heavy dialogue movie. It is supposed to be, an escapist thing to get people away from their sort of everyday lives and the stress of this year. And it's just for fun, really. And so I don't think you want to worry too much if you're not catching every subtitle, if they are, because a lot of it's in English and some of it doesn't matter, and it's just a lot of fun.
Well, it is. There's a lot of let's get out of here, like that kind of stuff. But yeah, I did find it oddly stress relieving with everything that's going on. I think we haven't had like a big film in 2020 really that has come out that sort of satiated that desire for a big Hollywood blockbuster. And this is huge. Before I let you go, Simon, what is how do you say action in Chinese? You said you could direct in Chinese?
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's everybody knows action, so you don't have to, you just
oh, you don't have to translate it.
But one of the classic, action movie things is like, everyone lean to the left, everyone lean to the right, the Star Trek gag. So I can do that. You go er san zuo, er san yo. So that is how you say 3, 2, 1 to the left, 3, 2, 1 to the right. So,
awesome. Wow. I want to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. Go to storyblocks.com/filmthreat, where you can use tools to make your own disaster movie. Simon West, it's a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Congratulations on the movie. It's a real crowd pleaser. And if there's a way to see it in the theater, see it in a theater. It's really just insane fun. I loved it.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you.